The registrar of the Meridian Compact had a practiced hand. I watched it move across the authentication panel, slow, deliberate, the kind of motion a man performs when he wants the room to feel the weight of it. The tally board above him already showed the count: 7 in favor, 1 abstention, 1 absence. The motion to expunge the Terran provisional delegation from the Compact's living record was, to everyone in the Vethra Assembly Hall that morning, a foregone conclusion. I had known it would pass before I boarded the transit at Kepler Station. My aide, a young woman named Solus, had told me not to go. "They'll film the vote," she said. "They want the image of you sitting there when it happens." She was right about that. The Compact's Information Bureau had 3 visual capture crews in position before we arrived. The Vethran press gallery was full. First Arbiter Korath had chosen a seat in the upper tier, above the chamber floor, where delegation heads sat during administrative proceedings, so that his elevation would be visible in every frame. I told Solus to pack lightly. We wouldn't be staying after. The reading of the motion took 11 minutes. It was thorough. I'll give Korath's staff that. They had prepared a document that covered every clause, every precedent, every procedural instrument the Compact's charter permitted them to invoke. Earth's provisional status was rescinded. Our trade corridor access was sealed. Our observer seats on the Commerce Subcommittee were declared vacant. Our delegation's credentials were to be struck from the living record, not archived, not suspended, struck as though we had never held them. The Compact had 9 species in full membership. Of the 7 who voted in favor, 4 were direct commercial competitors with human freight concerns in the outer band. 1 had a territorial grievance with a human colony that predated our provisional membership by 30 years. 2 simply followed Korath. The abstention came from the Daven Reach delegation, their senior envoy, a quiet figure named Veloshan, who had sat across from me at the commerce table for 4 years. He didn't meet my eyes during the reading. I didn't hold it against him. He had his own Compact to manage. When the registrar finished and looked up, there was a pause. The chamber expected me to speak. I think Korath expected it too. He had a prepared response. I could see the document open on his desk panel, his finger already at the margin where his rebuttal began. The visual capture crews leaned forward slightly. The press gallery was very still. I closed my case folder. It made a small sound in the quiet of the chamber. Not a dramatic sound, the soft compression of clasps engaging, the kind of noise a man makes when he is finished with something and ready to leave. I said, "The record reflects what the Compact intends. We won't contest it." 11 words. I had counted them on the transit from Kepler, running through the options, discarding the ones that explained or pleaded or argued. 11 words was the correct number. Then I stood, and my delegation stood with me, and we walked out. I remember the sound of our footsteps in the hall, 7 people, in step, not hurrying. Solus was directly behind my left shoulder. Our military attaché, a man named Reach Devorian who had spent 12 years in deep space logistics before he ever set foot in a council room, was at the rear. I had told them all the same thing I told Solus: pack lightly, walk straight, don't look back. None of them did. The chamber doors were large. Vethran architectural tradition required assembly entrances to be proportioned to the full membership count, which meant the doors were built for a room of several hundred. 7 humans walking through them looked, I was told later, like a very deliberate thing. Whether that was by design, I'll leave to the historians. The Compact's Information Bureau ran their footage that evening. Korath gave a statement, measured, formal, the kind of language that sounds like restraint but is built to humiliate. He spoke about the Compact's structural integrity and the necessity of membership standards, and the regrettable outcome of Earth's failure to meet the conditions of provisional status. None of it was technically false. Earth had missed 2 Commerce Subcommittee reporting deadlines. We had declined to provide crew manifests for 17 freight runs in the outer band. We had, on 3 separate occasions, failed to appear at arbitration sessions for territorial overlap disputes that the Compact had unilaterally scheduled without our agreement. What Korath did not say, because he did not know it yet, was why. The Lethani corridor had been operating for 14 months by the time the vote passed. It was not a human project in any official sense. It was a freight compact, privately structured, organized under the charter of a Daven free trade instrument that predated the Meridian Compact's own founding by 60 years. The signatories were 11 independent systems in the mid-reach band, none of them Compact members, several of them actively excluded from Compact membership for reasons the Compact preferred not to discuss in public session. The corridor ran freight, passengers, and communication traffic between those 11 systems and a hub station at the edge of what the compact called the outer band and what everyone outside the compact called, simply, open space. Human logistics firms had helped build 4 of the Corridor 7 transit nodes. Human navigation software ran the traffic management layer. Human engineers had spent 8 months on site at Davin Station, which was, technically, why we had missed the Commerce Subcommittee reporting deadlines. The crew manifests we declined to provide were corridor crew manifests. The arbitration sessions we skipped were scheduled, deliberately, on days our engineers were in transit. I had not told the compact any of this. I had not been asked directly, and the compact's discovery process had not been thorough enough to find it. By the time the vote was called, the Ledhani corridor had processed more freight tonnage in a single quarter than Earth's entire compact trade corridor had managed in its best full year of operation. We had not built it because we anticipated the vote. I want to be precise about that. The decision to pursue the Ledhani framework had been made 4 years earlier, at a commerce working session in Kepler, by a logistics director named Amara Voss who had looked at the compact's membership fee structure, its arbitration backlog, and its history of unilaterally redefining provisional status conditions, and had said, quietly, to the 2 people in the room with her, we should not build everything inside this fence. She was not wrong. The 12th system, the one that joined the corridor in the 6 weeks after the compact's vote, was the Davin Reach. Vel Ocean sent no message when the Davin Council ratified. We had not expected one. I was back at Kepler when the compact's Commerce Subcommittee first flagged the Ledhani traffic data, 22 months after the vote, almost 2 standard years. Solus brought me the intercept summary over morning tea. The subcommittee's language was careful, but the substance was plain. They had found a freight network they hadn't known existed, moving volume they hadn't accounted for, anchored by infrastructure they hadn't been told about, and they were now attempting to understand its relationship to the delegation they had just expunged from a living record. I read the summary twice. I set it down. I finished my tea. The compact sent a formal inquiry to the Terran diplomatic office at Kepler Station 6 days later. It was addressed, with some precision, to the senior trade envoy of the Terran Provisional Delegation, a title that, for the compact's own authenticated record, no longer existed. Our office replied in 3 sentences. We thank them for their inquiry. We noted that, for the compact's authenticated record of the Vethra vote, the Terran Provisional Delegation and all associated credentials had been expunged. We indicated that any future correspondence regarding Terran commercial activity in the mid-reach should be directed to the Ledhani Corridor Secretariat, registered under Davin Free Trade Charter, whose contact information was attached. I drafted those 3 sentences myself. I counted them twice before I sent them. The thing people misread about that period, the analysts, the commentators, the compact's own internal review commission, which spent 14 months producing a report that managed to miss the point entirely, is that they looked for the moment we had decided to humiliate the compact. They wanted a strategy session, a conspiracy, a plan with a timetable and a target date. They didn't find one because it didn't exist. What existed was Amara Voss, at a working table in Kepler, for years before the vote, saying we should not build everything inside this fence. What existed was Vel Ocean, abstaining in silence, understanding something the other 8 delegations in that chamber did not. What existed was 7 people walking through a very large door without looking back, because there was nothing behind us worth the turn. Koritha's term as first arbiter ended 18 months after the Ledhani discovery. His successor opened formal contact with the Corridor Secretariat within her first quarter. The negotiations that followed were, I'm told, thorough and unhurried, conducted by people who understood, by then, the value of patience. I wasn't in the room for those talks. I had retired by then, properly, finally, with a ceremony at Kepler that Solus organized and Devorian attended and Amara Voss attended also, though she had to transit in from Davin Station and arrived, characteristically, 20 minutes late and unapologetic. Someone asked me afterward, at the small dinner, late in the evening, when the formal part was done, whether I had felt anything, sitting in that chamber while the tally board filled in. Whether it had cost me something, closing that folder and standing up. I thought about it for a moment. No, I said. By then the door we were walking through was already wider than the one they were closing. It wasn't a satisfying answer. I know that. But it was the true one, and I had learned, over a long career in rooms full of people who preferred the satisfying version, that the true one was usually shorter.